Sure. Daryl, when you were at the DHS in 2009, you led this research report on the rise of right-wing extremist violence here in America. And there was this report was leaked in 2009, and there was a lot of pushback that you received from conservative talk show hosts and conservative policymakers and others who felt that you had tarnished all church-going devout Christians. And you had in the report also mentioned the fact that some of these right-wing groups were trying to recruit returning military veterans as well. And so there was this big sort of furor about how you might have sort of stigmatized this entire community. And that is sort of exactly how some Muslim community leaders feel about, the government's countering violent extremist efforts that are sort of focused on the Muslim community. And there are lots of parallels there, and they also feel that by focusing on the Muslim community, you're tarnishing an entire community and reinforcing this notion that, yes, that's where the terrorist threat lies. And so how would you, now that, you've done all of this research, how would you get around that? How do we talk about and identify a threat without, again, potentially stigmatizing the entire community?
Yeah, so I think it's very important. One of the lessons learned from the report that I wrote in 2009 was the importance of terminology, the words that we choose to describe the threat. Mm-hmm. So in my case, some of the words that were offensive or people found, kind of misinterpreted what they meant was the term right-wing. Mm-hmm. People thought we were talking about conservative Americans. Right-wing is just a political term that we use in the counterterrorism community to describe those threats that are on the far right of the political spectrum. So, white nationalists, some of the paramilitary groups that we have here, some of the anti-government groups and individuals. In hindsight, that's a misunderstanding on the part of the public what the term right-wing meant. Okay, we said right-wing extremism, mm-hmm. Not right-wing conservatism.
Right.
So there was a misunderstanding there. Something that we could have corrected and done better is I used the term disgruntled veterans, and if you read the subheading or the narrative under that heading, we were talking about veterans being targeted for recruitment, mm-hmm. Because they're returning home to an economy that had lapsed. Some of them may not be getting the health care treatment that they deserved. Some of them might not be able to find a job. And so they were vulnerable for these extremist groups to approach them and recruit. But if someone were to just glance at the report and see the term disgruntled veteran, mm-hmm. it sounds like these veterans were coming home angry and actively joining these groups with the intent of harming Americans. And that wasn't the message or intent of the paper. And lastly, we had a definition that was buried in a footnote of what a right-wing extremist is. Mm-hmm. In hindsight, we should have inserted a disqualifying language saying violent or criminally minded individuals. So we just, because we were dealing with a broad spectrum of extremists on the far right, we're talking white supremacist groups, militia groups, sovereign citizens, anti-abortion extremists, we had to broaden that definition. And by broadening it, it made it too broad so that if someone took that definition out of context and just quoted it by itself, mm-hmm. and standing alone, it kind of gave the appearance that we were looking at all conservatives and Christians, when in reality we were only looking at those individuals who were endorsing, making calls for violence or mobilizing towards violence and committing criminal activity.
Sure. And so